I'm Winnie Wyatt. I want to share with you one of my children's books. It's a children's book, but there's a lot of good stuff in it for grown-ups as well. And I called it Travis's Ladder. And the idea is that a young boy climbs a ladder as he grows older. An interesting thing happened recently. I typed on my computer ladders, and here came Walmart's ad with my book on it. So, I don't know. I told Walmart this was my ladder, and they say it's not available. I said, no, you don't have my ladder, but you can have my book. So we will see what Walmart does. No idea how Walmart got Travis's ladder. Anyway, Travis's Ladder. It's about a little boy who grew up on a ranch out in West Texas. And he had been homeschooled by his mother. And she was getting up 12. He was going to have math and algebra. And she just thought she just maybe wasn't capable. And so they decided he ought to go to town and get some learning from the public schools. So they found a couple, an older couple in town, who said yes, they would take him, he could live with them. He didn't want to go because he had fun out there on the ranch. His grandfather was always there. He rode his horse and he took care of the cattle. But his father took him on to this place. Well, he was eating supper there with them, and he was thinking about all the things back home. The people he had talked to. The last of all, he had talked to his grandpa. Well, his mother didn't bother him, but here he was, and he realized he was leaving. He was tired. He didn't want to go, and his grandpa came to talk to him out in the barn, and he said, "Grandpa, I don't want to go away to school. I don't want to leave you." And he leaned against his bay gelding, his horse, crying. So Grandpa stopped chewing his tobacco for a while and didn't even spit, but just sat there on a bale of hay looking at the horse and then at Travis. And finally he spat, landing on the gelding's black hoof so that it shone as if polished. I remember reading about another young fellow that had to leave home, Trav. Now this fellow had done something real mean, and he was running away from his folks. You're not running away from us, and you sure haven't done anything mean. Now that rascal had something to worry about out there all by himself, lions and wolves. But he had a dream, remember, about a ladder that reached to the stars. And from that moment on, he set about climbing it. We're all still climbing a ladder. You mean Jacob? Yes, Jacob, that ornery cuss. And if he could climb that ladder, so can you, for all of us back here at home are pushing you up those rungs. Well, he was going on, and his dad was trying to comfort him, say, "Oh, you'll get to play football. Oh, it'll just be wonderful." But the closer they got to town, the tighter Travis's chest got. And he looked at all the things around him, and he was just afraid of everything he saw. He was even afraid of the Hartleys, these people he was going to go live with. He had just met them before, and she was a music teacher. What if she asked him about Mozart or expected him to take piano lessons? He was afraid of everything. Well, he was trying to eat the supper that she had fixed for him for his first meal there. And it was all right, except he couldn't swallow. He chewed and he chewed. It just couldn't get it down. And he didn't mind that. He'd keep chewing. But the thing he didn't mind was his eyes kept watering up. And he was so ashamed because he was 12 years old. And he, just at this point, shouldn't be crying, but for these strangers he didn't even know. But Mr. Hartley cleared his throat and pushed his plate away. And he said his food was only half gone. "Well, now, I know what we need, Lovey. This fried chicken is fine, but what we need is some Bluebell ice cream. Let's me and you go get it, Trav." So they jumped up and they started down to the 7-Eleven store to get some ice cream in a little chest they carried along with them. And they said out on their walk, and Mr. Hartley told him, "Now, Travs, I was just thinking about the time I went off to school. I was older than you, about 16. I went to live in a boys' dorm, and I was so scared and so ashamed of being scared that I put my head under the sheet and just cried." Well, I looked at him. Well, I can't imagine you getting scared as big as you are. Well, it wasn't so big back then. And there was another thing I was ashamed of. I had to carry all my clothes in a paper sack. I didn't even have a suitcase. Just my toothbrush and 2 shirts in a paper sack. "Well, I guess you made it up that first rung," Travis said. "What's that?" "Well, my grandpa said we're all climbing a ladder, one rung at a time, and that the first rung is the hardest." Well, now, I think he's right. That first rung could be the hardest, or maybe the last rung will be.